Chapter 29. Hermitage abandoned, Ichiha's hatred. Mount Myaboku. Land of Toads. Jiraiya stood with the two elder toads near the quick access pool that would allow them to reach Konoha in record time. The man of course would not be able to fit through though, it was alright, because he had another plan. They were just finalizing their plans before they made to leave Myaboku. So, we should head to Konoha first then and warn them? Fukasaku asked Jiraiya as the man shouldered his scroll and placed his sandals on his feet. The two elderly toads had left the great toad sage's quarters with Jiraiya as he was preparing to leave. Because of the grave circumstances, Fukasaku had volunteered himself and Shima to accompany the Sannin to Konoha and fight. While Jiraiya did indeed plan to go to Konoha, he had a pit stop that he would have to head to first. Where they stood now, Konoha wouldn't stand a chance without a little help, and he had to settle a debt with an old friend. Not exactly. Jiraiya notified, looking down into the confused faces of both toads. I'm going to make an extra stop somewhere before I head to Konoha. I want you two to head to Konoha and warn them. If you could, it might not be a bad idea to get a messenger toad to Tsunade at the summit. It'll be better if she knows what's going on as soon as possible. The two toads looked at each other and nodded in assent to his requests. That sounds like a plan, Jiraiya-chan. If we get a messenger to the summit, we might get the other villages' support too. Shima suggested since Konoha was in the alliance, it would only be right to bring along the other Kage and their forces. Jiraiya boy, do you want Tsunade to know that you are alive in the message? Jiraiya grabbed his chin in thought before sweat dropping and furiously shaking his head negatively. The two elders smirked. I don't think that would be such a great idea. It can wait. Besides, how else will I appear as the hero if she already knows I'll be there? He chuckled nervously, not really believing the joke himself. The two toads just shook their heads in pity before Fukasaku asked the burning question on their mind. Jiraiya boy, why aren't you going to Konoha first? What is this extra stop you were talking about? You might need us with you. Jiraiya shook his head as he went through a few hand signs and smiled to the two confused elders. I'm sorry. But this is something I have to do on my own. You know what you have to do. Before they could argue further, Jiraiya teleported away back to the shinobi continent. Fukasaku scratched his head and Shima crossed her arms in frustration. The boy was still stubborn and enigmatic, even if he could be a jokester. She just hoped he would realize when the right time to arrive in Konoha was, or else they would have a lot of trouble on their hands. Shima. She turned to her husband after he called her name. You go to Konoha and warn them of the danger. I'll get the messenger toad ready and be right behind you. We can't waste a second of our time in preparing for those tailed beasts. The woman nodded and jumped into the pool of water, using the seals there to teleport her to the other pool near Konoha. Fukasaku summoned a trusty runner toad and had him deliver a quick message to the Kage summit. The red and green toad saluted his boss and jumped into the teleporting pool, closely followed by Fukasaku. Meanwhile, the great toad sage gathered the large fighting toads to alert and prepare them for the coming battle. The toads were on the war march. Uzumaki. Yuzu Tower. Ao was sitting at his friend's desk, looking through a few documents of importance as he waited for Naruto to return. It had been a few hours since the fateful encounter with Akatsuki in the streets of the Shinobi district and Naruto had yet to return, much to the worry of Ao. As long as he was out, it was the Anbu general's duty to keep control over the village as temporary leader. In the meantime, he was waiting for reports from his Anbu units guarding the southwest wall as they had yet to report in. It wasn't necessarily odd, considering the fact that the rainstorm had yet to let up and it was difficult to maneuver with the strong winds blasting the village. However, Anbu were professionals and something like that shouldn't have been obstructing them from coming to report in person. But while it worried the man, he had other big problems to deal with. From what I can tell here from this message from Kiri's resistance forces, Madara is on the move. He was seen taking 4 large pots with him, all labeled a specific number. With that madman's ability, who knows what he's got cooked up. As soon as Naruto arrives, I'll have to report this to him. Ao scowled and shook his head at the parchment. It wasn't news they wanted to hear. Then again, what can we expect? We were lucky that Madara and Akatsuki weren't active for the past few months. It gave us time to establish the village. I guess we are lucky that we aren't a major threat, or else Madara might have been coming after us instead of Konoha. Suddenly, a yellow flash appeared in front of the desk and Ao quickly stood up in defense. He was greeted by the Uzumaki, somewhat soaked from the rain, but otherwise in perfect health. He smiled and walked around the desk to meet with him face to face. He seemed happy, a certain glow was radiating off of the Kage that Ao noticed. Something good must have happened to him, I wonder. Uzumaki-sama, good to see you're alright. When we saw you gone with those Akatsuki, we feared the worst. Naruto looked at Ao and nodded in assent. He figured they wouldn't have been too happy with that scene. Yes, I was able to meet with them and discuss a more diplomatic solution. Turns out they are defectors from the organization and wanted to help us. I accepted it, since we need all the help we can get. However, I don't have much time to be here, so give me a quick report, Ao. The man was surprised by the information supplied, but quickly forgot it so that he could respond to the order. Sir, we received a message from Kiri's resistance group that Madara has begun to move his forces against Konoha. Naruto visibly stiffened as he sifted through the papers on the desk, shaken by the news that Akatsuki was moving. I see. That could be a problem. Ao was surprised by the calm in his voice, but paid no heed. He went on to explain the strange circumstances surrounding the invasion forces. That's not all, apparently it isn't any normal invasion force with shinobi. The man has 4 large pots that I believe have something to do with the sealing technique. I have no proof though, just a hunch. What should we do about this? Naruto thought for a moment, his eyes were looking at the desk and thought. Nothing for now, we aren't even in an alliance with them, so it doesn't matter. What else? Ao was again shocked at the certain edge of ice in his tone, but realized that he was right, they had no obligation to save Konoha. Well, I am concerned about the fact that a few of my squads are not reporting in at their posts. With this storm I feel like cutting them some slack, but for some it has been over an hour since the designated time. Naruto silently cursed and shook his head, he knew exactly what that meant. They are probably dead, we have an infiltrator in our village. Ao stiffened and scowled under his white mask. They had an enemy in the village so soon after the Akatsuki arrival? An enemy? Who? Naruto met his eyes for the first time and scowled as well, spitting out the name with venom. Sasuke Uchiha, apprentice and puppet of Madara. Ao's eyes went back to normal as he processed the information and concluded he wasn't too surprised by the fact that the boy had come, albeit he was angry that he had slipped by the man so easily. How do you want us to handle this, sir? Naruto had faith in pain, he would leave it up to Nagato to win the day. Nothing, have our spare Anbu squads move to confirm the situation in the Uzumaki compound and have a double layer of jonin and medical teams deployed there. I already have someone that is dealing with him as we speak, just make sure my wife and son are kept safe. Ao was confused as to the order, seeing as how no one in the village, save for a few, had the caliber to fight the Uchiha, but nodded anyway. Once again he would have to trust the younger man's judgment call. Yes sir, I will deploy with the teams to your house myself and ensure the safety of your family. Where will you be, Naruto? Naruto was about to answer when Yamasha and a few other lava monkeys appeared in the room, surprising the ex-hunter Nin. Uzumaki-sama. They announced, bowing to Naruto. The blonde sighed and knew what they had come for, it was finally time to begin. I have training to begin, something that unfortunately cannot be delayed any further. Ao, I have left my last orders here in this scroll, please read them as soon as possible and have them fulfilled. Naruto held up a red scroll with the Uzumakage's stamp seal placed over it indicating its importance. He then held up a larger scroll that had a strap to fit over a person's shoulder. Give this one to Ikaru, he will know what to do with it. Ao nodded and placed the orders in one of his vest scroll pouches while shouldering the larger scroll to take with him. Anything else, sir? He asked as it seemed the Uzumaki would be leaving them again with little warning, a recurring trait with the young leader that made Ao uncomfortable. Just know that when I return, it will be the last time I will ever leave my people again. When I return. Naruto paused and walked around his desk to stand in front of the summons, a serious scowl set on his features. We will finish this war once and for all. As soon as Naruto uttered the last syllable, he and the monkeys disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving Ao to gather the forces of Yuzu once again. Be safe, Naruto. I hope that for all our sakes, you can complete that training in record time. Ao thought to himself before he held up a hand sign and disappeared to accomplish his mission. Uzumaki. Uzumaki compound. As Mei slept soundly within her home, a confrontation was brewing at the front gates of the compound. Pain made no move to start the battle, waiting for Sasuke to make the first move. The boy in question was glaring at the ringed-eyed man with his Mangekyo activated, dark energy flowing through him as he allowed his hate to fuel his power. Get out of my way. Sasuke charged forward with his sword, intent on getting rid of the first one to stand in his way. The Diva Path held up an open palm towards the boy, while the Asura Path had a smirk on its face. Before Sasuke could respond, a burst of speed from the mechanical path forced his eyes on it instead, and he brought up his sword to block a kick from it. With its first attack a failure, the Asura Path weaved easily out of a stab from Sasuke's weapon and grabbed a hold of his weapon arm. Using its immense strength, Asura threw Sasuke into the air, allowing Diva to use his technique safely. Shinra Tensei. Sasuke felt a concentrated blast of chakra explode into his vulnerable body and was sent flying out of the village into the deep forest. Satisfied with the distance he shot the boy, Diva looked at Asura and inclined his head towards the animal path, and the strongman of the group nodded in assent. He grabbed the woman's slender body and threw her in the direction Sasuke landed, allowing Nagato to move the battle away from Uzumaki. The animal path sensed Sasuke's chakra and landed on a tree branch safely, going through hand signs before slamming her hand onto the ground. Summoning technique. From the smoke came the other 5 paths, and they hustled over to where Sasuke's dark energy was leaking from. They found the boy leaning against a tree, trying to gather his breath. A long trench in the ground and a few broken limbs in the trees above indicated his landing had not been graceful, and there was signs of bleeding from the Uchiha. With no remorse in their bodies, the paths got into a formation and prepared to finish the boy off as he glared at them with his eyes. Damn you, Pain. At first I thought you were joking, should have known you weren't the joking type. Oh well, I suppose your usefulness has ended. Sasuke's left eye began to bleed as his murderous smirk erupted on his face, obviously believing the battle over. Pain showed no signs of moving as the boy prepared his eye's special attack, Amaterasu. The black flames raced towards the gathered paths before the Preta moved in front of them and held his hands up in defense. Sasuke began to chuckle darkly as he watched the man futilely attempt to block his attack. It would do no good. Amaterasu was the god's vengeance, the flames of the heavens, they were unquenchable. No one could put them out except a fellow Mangekyo user. Or at least, that was what the boy thought until he saw the flames begin to warp and disappear into the large Akatsuki's hands. What? How the hell did he defeat the flames? Preta lowered its hands, a small amount of smoke emanated from either hand, and the smell of burnt flesh was obvious. While the Preta could absorb the attack, even something of its magnitude could only be contained so many times before the Preta would be unable to do so again. Nagato coughed up blood from absorbing Amaterasu flames. It was an overwhelming amount of power that the path took in. As it was only a lifeless puppet with no chakra system of its own, the chakra absorbed from the Amaterasu was transferred to Nagato. Instead of being able to harness it though, the dark flames were almost lethal to Nagato before he ended their existence with his powers. That was too close. How did you? Sasuke couldn't find the right words to articulate to his opponent. He was too shocked by his almighty powers being defeated so easily. Do not underestimate the powers of the Rinnegan. I am your superior in all ways, Uchiha. Show some respect before I end you. The diva countered. Nagato enjoyed the look of recoil on the boy's face with the counter. Damn it, I guess I'll have to try something else. Sasuke said out loud as he prepared himself. He did his best to calm down before beginning. Pain watched with little emotion, feeling it was best to humor the boy for a short time before he killed him. It would do no good for him to go into the afterlife whining like a child for being defeated so quick. It would not be a welcome encounter for anyone. I cannot delay his death for too long. My own time is coming shortly. Nagato thought to himself as he prepared to meet Sasuke's counterattack with his own. Crouching in a low stance, Sasuke suddenly used hidden seals on his forearms to summon 2 large windmill shuriken. Pain watched as the boy threw both weapons towards his group. He held up his hand and Sasuke could see a concentrated sphere of chakra begin to form around him. So that's his power. The ability to repel objects with his chakra. That is the power of the Rinnegan? Looks like this will be quite a challenge. Shinra Tensei. The projectiles were suddenly launched back at Sasuke at outrageous speeds, forcing him to think fast. With a quick crouch movement, Sasuke leaped through the space between the shuriken to escape the attack. Sensing the boy's precarious position, Nagato manipulated the Asura path to send it on a crash course with Sasuke that would allow the blade on its back to impale the Uchiha. Sasuke read the attack with his Sharingan and began to focus his chakra. Asura impaled the boy, but soon found that it had been tricked, hitting only a log. It scowled and threw the broken wood off of its body, searching for the boy's location. Substitution. How simple. Nagato thought over the move that the Uchiha used to escape as he searched for the boy with 6 pairs of eyes. Chidori Senbon. Sasuke whispered from a nearby tree branch and shot dozens of small lightning needles straight at the recovering Asura, seeing its vulnerability. Unfortunately for Sasuke, Naraka Path saw the attack coming, and without even turning towards the attack's location, Asura jumped out of the way with a sidestep. Sasuke's eyes widened at the unbelievable move done by the Path, taking suspicious notice of the Naraka Path staring at him. Their eyes? Are they linked? That one wasn't even looking at me, and he knew when to dodge. The Rinnegan has many features. Bansho Tenin. Sasuke felt a pull on his body and saw the Diva Path holding its hand towards him again, this time using his power to pull Sasuke instead of push. Damn it. He cursed mentally when he saw the Asura step in his flight path with its carving knife aimed right at his abdomen, a sure hit this time. Calling on his left eye's power again, Sasuke formed an Amaterasu shield in front of him, forcing the pre-top path to jump in front and take the jutsu. This, coupled with Nagato's pain from absorbing the technique, led the Diva Path to momentarily falter in his technique and freed Sasuke. With Nagato's moment of vulnerability evident in Sasuke's eyes, he stabbed the vulnerable Pretarite in the chest. This incapacitated the body, leaving 5 paths still up. That is 1 down. Sasuke looked to see both the human and Asura path rush him and stalled his counterattack. He caught 1 punch from the human path and almost knocked the Asura path's fist away when it suddenly changed course to avoid his counter. The air was knocked out of Sasuke when its fist impacted his stomach, leaving him vulnerable to a devastating knee kick from human that sent him flying backwards. The Asura grabbed one of its hands and pulled hard, revealing a cord from within the arm that had missiles attached to it. Aiming them all at Sasuke, it shot them off and had their heat-seeking abilities keep the lock on Sasuke's body strong, so he couldn't escape. The Uchiha pushed himself up and prepared his counter. Sasuke had finally begun to sweat from the intensity of the battle. The missiles impacted the spot where Sasuke had occupied, and Nagato waited until his vision cleared to confirm his death. He was disappointed, however, when out of the smoke came Sasuke crouching in a large crater. The difference was that he had activated his level 2 curse form and used one of its wings to protect him from the blast. Observing his new form, Pain concluded that he would now have extra stamina and strength and prepared himself with caution. Sasuke lowered his battered wing and looked at the paths, taking a quick stock of the situation. His surprise was topped once again when he saw all 6 bodies standing, that included the one that he had stabbed into. How was he still up? Sasuke was sure he had killed him with a stab to the heart. Another power of the Rinnegan? How many abilities does he have? Sasuke grimaced in pain and held his side, still not fully healed from the first encounter with Pain. Now you see, it is futile to stand against Pain. Diva announced to the boy. Nagato had seen his shock when Prita was resurrected, and that allowed fear to creep into the Uchiha's heart. I am not done yet. A warbled war cry erupted from the Avenger's throat as he created a Chidori and used it to electrify his sword, charging forward towards Diva. It held up a hand towards him, as if to make him stop. Sasuke had already seen the trick once, though, and waited for the right moment to move. Pain launched his concentrated shockwave but was surprised to see Sasuke time his dodge correctly and sidestep the blast. It knocked down a tree behind where Sasuke stood before ending. He continued his charge until the animal path arrived in front of Diva and summoned something. Summoning technique. A large rhinoceros appeared and impacted Sasuke, slamming him backwards and away from the main path. The animal path's eyes widened when it saw numerous large white snakes appear over the rhino and begin to constrict its body. Before it could be killed, she unsummoned it, allowing the human path to charge forward with a chakra disruption blade appearing from its arm. Sasuke met his attack with his blade, and the clack could be heard over the roaring rainstorm when the two impacted. In the bit of strength, Sasuke found that they were both equal and knew he had to do something. His Sharingan tracked Asura and Diva coming towards him on either flank. One had a similar chakra blade, while the other had simply its fists. With no other options, Sasuke opened both of his eyes to reveal the Mangekyo. A ribsage formed around his body, and all 3 paths were forced back from the defensive barrier. Nagato had never encountered such a defense and was momentarily intrigued by it before beginning to prepare another attack. Sasuke's breathing had picked up, and it was obvious in combination with battle fatigue that creating Susanoo was difficult for his body to handle. Asura prepared to launch more missiles from the hidden areas in his hollow arms, while Diva went through hand seals for a jutsu. The other paths stood back as they had no long-range capabilities. Sasuke observed the beginnings of the counterattack and began to focus his anger and hatred to further develop the Susanoo. Arms began to sprout from the ribcage as Pain launched his attack. Fire release, flame bullet. Diva released a large blast of fire from its mouth towards Sasuke as the missiles impacted his shielded body. Craters were created everywhere around the Susanoo's body and Sasuke grunted from exertion in keeping the shield up. Pain's fire attack hit next, and it literally forced Sasuke onto his knees from the pain from both his eyes being used to maintain the skeleton. The smoke was cleared to reveal Sasuke's shield intact, albeit much paler, and the energy wavering. The two arms that had formed now both held a single sort of blackish-red chakra. Sasuke launched his attack at the concentrated paths, using his sword to swing in a horizontal arc low to the ground to make it more difficult to dodge. As it was too quick for a complete dodge, Asura was sacrificed by throwing Diva into the air, while the others had just enough room to escape on their own. Sasuke cursed as the 5 remaining paths easily recovered and stared at him with little emotion to their downed comrade. What does it take to kill this guy? Sasuke was again assaulted by a surge of pain emanating from his eyes and fell to the ground on all fours. Pain looked at him with little pity and saw victory close at hand as the arms disappeared, leaving the weakened ribcage all that was keeping Sasuke safe. The two opponents met each other's gaze for a moment before Pain launched his next attack, concentrated on finishing off Sasuke's shield. Wind release? Gale force blow. Pain gathered up the wind in his mouth and shot it forward with a certain swing to his neck, allowing it to release in the form of a wide crescent. The attack was sent like a razor-sharp knife at Sasuke, impacting and shattering the unbreakable Susanoo. With little physical energy left, Sasuke once again activated his level 2 curse mark and used that chakra to give him a burst of speed and escape into the forest. Diva watched him run for a moment before looking back at Naraka to see it just finishing up reviving Asura. Nagato could feel the end was close and sent all 6 paths after the ailing form of Sasuke. With little energy left, Sasuke was now desperate to either escape or receive backup from Madara. He figured the old man couldn't accomplish his objectives if he was allowed to die, so he just had to live long enough until he came to bail him out. While it would be embarrassing to explain his loss, Sasuke was confident that he could save face by admitting to not having enough info on the Rinnegan for an excuse. Just have to escape that blasted pain. Sasuke felt a sharp surge of pain in his abdomen and screamed in anguish. He missed the next jump from his flinch and landed hard on the wet, muddy ground of Yuzu. He deactivated his Sharingan for a moment to assess his surroundings when a great horror came upon him. He could see nothing in front of him. Everything was white and scratchy, he had gone blind. In disbelief and anger, Sasuke gathered his chakra into his hand and sent a strong surge of lightning into the ground. The large explosion sent Sasuke flying backwards and brought Pain to the pitiful sight of a cowering Sasuke. The boy was in a fetal position near a fallen tree. As he got closer, Pain could hear the boy whimpering words of forgiveness or something other. It was useless though, no god would hear him today. Look how far the mighty Uchiha have fallen. Sasuke warily looked up from his prone position, looking in all directions trying to find the source of the noise. He looked absolutely terrified. So, the Mangekyo's drawback has finally finished destroying your eyesight. How pitiful. Sasuke futilely waved his arms in front of him, attempting to ward away Pain. Stay back. Don't touch me. Avoiding his pitiful swats, the human and pre-top paths took both his arms and lifted him to sit on his knees in front of Diva. There is no point in resisting, I am already absorbing your chakra and reading your mind. There is nothing left for you to do but resign yourself to fate. Sasuke's blind eyes finally seemed to lock onto Diva's cold, toneless voice. He looked up into the eyes of his soon-to-be executioner with fear. Please. Spare me. He begged, it was nothing to Nagato, he was one of hundreds that had asked the same thing moments before their death. Pitiful, you use your last words to beg. What would your family think of you now? Your brother gave everything to redeem you, and yet you killed him in your lust for power. Your parents were sacrificed because of fear, while all they did was show love and hope for you. There is nothing left that they love inside of this body, it is merely a shell. The former Sasuke Uchiha died long ago, think of this as a favor. Sasuke felt a pang in his heart as he was reminded of the actions of his family. He then realized that maybe there was a different path he could have followed had he chosen differently. Itachi. Sasuke whispered as Diva lifted its arm into the air and formed a chakra blade. Mother. Diva brought it down and leveled it a short distance from the boy's heart, preparing for the final move. "I'm sorry." Pain launched his arm forward and impaled Sasuke on his blade, successfully piercing his heart and ending the boy's life. "This god acknowledges your apology." Pain noted as the boy showed signs of redemption in his final moments, something a lesser man like Madara would never admit to. He shucked the boy's body off of his blade and retracted it back into his body. Nagato was feeling quite weakened after the battle was over, suddenly realizing his adrenaline kept him in the dark over his body's grim condition. Seeing that he had little time to spare, the human path picked Sasuke's body up and headed back for Uzumaki. Madara felt something in the back of his mind and looked off in a seemingly random direction. His thoughts were clouded with a variety of emotions: disappointment, expectation, pity and even laughter. One of the men near him saw him stop moving and questioned his leader. "Sir, is something wrong?" Madara turned his attention back to the trail and kept walking with little else on the matter to say. "No, keep moving. Sasuke has died. That is one loose end gone." Uzumaki. Uzukage Tower. In a flash of light, the six paths were in the empty, dark room of Naruto's job place. Diva grabbed an empty scroll, wrote a few notes down with a brush and ink and finally sealed Sasuke's body away for a proper burial. If he had behaved differently at the end, Pain would have left him to rot in the muddy earth. With his final request of forgiveness though, Nagato felt generous enough. A cough of blood on Nagato's end made all the paths stiffen for a moment, his end was drawing near. With little else to do, Nagato recalled his paths back to him. He wanted to make sure that only Naruto would find their dead corpses and he wanted to make sure Yahiko would receive a proper burial. Going through a few hand signs, Nagato used what was left of his chakra to awaken the seventh path and bring back to life those killed by Sasuke that night. With the boy's confession and the need for able-bodied shinobi for the coming battle, Nagato knew that he had to use the last of his powers wisely. Yuzu Island. Nagato's hideaway. As he waited for his bodies to return, Nagato struggled to keep conscious as the internal damage to his body began to leak over to his outer appearance. His bleeding was now emanating from his back as well as his mouth, and his breathing was very erratic as his lungs worked harder to take in the desired amount of oxygen. Whether it be an illusion brought on by his dire situation or a gift from Kami, Nagato saw in front of him a small rift in space. Within it was his dear friend, Yahiko. The boy was in his old AIM overcoat, the same one that he wore the day he died. His face was bright and cheerful, exactly like it was when all three orphans were with Jiraiya, like when they were a family. "Yahiko?" Nagato, despite his condition, garbled out a greetings through a bloody smile. To his disappointment, the boy did not say anything back. He merely stood there with a smile, beckoning Nagato to come closer. "I'm sorry, Yahiko. Cough, I wasn't the messiah you thought I could be." Cough. More blood erupted from his mouth and stained the rocky ground below him. Yahiko frowned at the sight of his friend. Nagato began to smile as he remembered Naruto, that boy was the true messiah of peace. Yahiko seemed to notice his upbeat attitude and smiled again. "I know I didn't. Cough, give the world peace like I promised. But I cough found someone else that could do it better than I, please, Yahiko. Give Naruto your blessing." Cough. Again Nagato found himself at odds with his coughing, now finding it very difficult to talk with blood coming up from his esophagus. Yahiko nodded his head once and then reached his hand forward through the portal and towards Nagato's unmoving form. With a little burst of energy, Nagato slowly detached his left arm from the machine and weakly reached out to grab his friend's hand. "Hang on. Wheeze. I'm coming." When their hands touched, Nagato felt a light feeling inside his frail body slowly leave himself and felt a pull that would send him through the portal to Yahiko. He now realized that this was Kami's way of delivering him to the afterlife, and he wanted to thank the kind God for allowing him to see Yahiko once more. Once his entire body had been pulled through the rift, it disappeared, leaving a shell of a body behind and 6 fallen puppets at the mouth of the cave. The god amongst men had passed on. Land of Sound. Jiraiya was running through the trees, jumping from branch to branch in search of the entrance to Orochimaru's current lair. With use of the great toad sage's crystal ball, they were able to locate Orochimaru's location, which Jiraiya desperately needed. He had to speak to his teammate, it was urgent business with the oncoming attack of Konoha. He felt a few chakra signatures approaching him and knew he had little time to play games. He quickly went through hand signs in mid-hop and launched a large flame bullet forward through the trees. 3 bodies fell to the ground, burnt and writhing in utter pain from the attack. The sound shinobi had thought they would ambush the trespasser, when in reality they were no match for the particular invader. Jiraiya created a Rasengan in his palm and launched forward into an empty spot on a tree branch. He was rewarded with a scream and blood when the sound shinobi reappeared from his chameleon technique and slammed into the tree behind him. Jiraiya could feel no more presences and continued on, this time without any obstacles along the way. I must close if they bothered to attack me now. Come out, Orochimaru, I know you're here. It wasn't long before Jiraiya's keen eyes found purchase with a steel door that was up against a large piece of rock. With a single strong punch, the door came crashing down and allowed Jiraiya easy entrance to his old friend's lair. His cool pose only lasted a moment before he broke down into tears and nursed his hurt hand from hitting a heavy steel door. Ouch! Land of Sound. Orochimaru's hideout. Kabuto was on his way to attend to his master with some medicine when a faint echo emanated from down the long hallway of rock. He thought it sounded like a person, but shrugged it off as impossible before continuing to walk down the hall. With his primary host gone, Orochimaru could only delay his inevitable death with drugs that Kabuto cooked up, but the silver-haired boy was running out of formula to keep his master alive. They had few options anyway since the Land of Sound was falling apart without an active leader. Orochimaru was now confined to his bed, no longer strong enough to get up and walk. Only a miracle could bring him back to his original strength. Kabuto had hoped to find a solution, but there was none. His master had also been quiet on the fact he was dying, a far outcry from the complaints he had been expecting. Perhaps Orochimaru-sama has a plan. Or maybe he has finally accepted his dream of immortality is coming to an end. What will I do when he is dead? Kabuto honestly didn't know the answer. He would be killed if he returned to the Leaf, but he was considered a criminal everywhere but the Sound. It wouldn't last, though, as his immunity from being within Sound would falter upon his master's death. Without Orochimaru, there was no Sound. He was the village leader, lead scientist, and practically the ruler over the entire nation of rice fields. Once the neighboring countries received word of his death, they would see the weakness and attempt to invade. He knocked on the door of his master's room upon arriving and received a feeble "come in" from Orochimaru. Kabuto opened the door to find the pitiful form of his master laying in bed as if he had come down with a common cold. It wasn't any normal sickness though, it was the rejection of the previous host's body and his age that kept him so weak. Kabuto began to move towards his master but stopped when Orochimaru held up a hand. A scowl on his features told him something was wrong. I'm disappointed, Kabuto, I expected that you were better than that. His eyes narrowed in confusion and his brow crinkled as he attempted to decipher what he meant. What do you mean, Orochimaru-sama? The pale man scoffed and pointed at the boy's shadow, created from the candles that hung from the walls of the room. It began to change shape and forced Kabuto to jump away from it, close to Orochimaru. Jiraiya appeared and cracked his joints from being in such an uncomfortable spot for that long period of time. Kabuto glared at the newcomer and got out a kunai. He was prepared to defend Orochimaru to the death if necessary. Jiraiya. How unpleasant it is to see you. Orochimaru seethed. His usual sarcasm was gone in place to pessimism due to his dire situation. The pale-haired man looked his old teammate up and down and gave a hearty laugh that was full of pity. The snake Sannin scowled and felt the urge to crush the man's neck, only to realize he could barely move. Shut up, you bastard. Kabuto yelled out, clutching his kunai tightly as he waited for the attack. Jiraiya calmed himself a bit and allowed a smile to grace his face despite the tense situation. Orochimaru. I thought you were stronger than that. I guess the years haven't been too kind to you since we last met. The scowl did not disappear from the man's face and he sneered in angry disgust. What the hell do you want, Jiraiya? Finally come to kill me? It is sad that you have to come and do it when I can no longer fight back. Jiraiya's smile turned to a serious scowl as he looked his old comrade in the eye, trying to show how serious him being there was. No. Orochimaru's eyes widened as Jiraiya denied his guess. I've come to ask for your help. Both Orochimaru and Kabuto's eyes widened at the sound of that. Jiraiya wanted their help? Land of Fire. Konohagakure outskirts. Madara was nearing Konoha. His men were already beginning the final preparations of the assault. The plan was simple: take control of the beasts and summon them right in the midst of Konoha's surprised defenders. The village would be annihilated in an instant with the power of four-tailed beasts. It would not take a moment longer for Madara to accomplish his revenge. Sir, we are awaiting your order to crack the seals. Madara turned his attention to the men that surrounded each of the pots and brought his hands up to signal them to begin. Go. Release the beasts from the containers. It is almost time, even Hashirama Senju himself couldn't stop me now. Land of Iron. Iron Castle. Kage meeting. And so I suggest we unite our intelligence divisions into one organization. Finished his speech, bringing the Kage's attention to the benefits of combining their forces. That is all well and good, but when will we strike back against Madara? Inoki wondered out loud to the group. They had done so much preparation yet had not made a single claim to attack. We have no target. Kiri is merely a puppet to Madara. We must wait until he reveals himself to challenge him. Gaara reminded the Tsuchikage, who gave a huff of frustration before quieting down. Can we defeat him, though, when we don't even know his strength? Sanada muttered, loud enough for the other Kage to hear. Inoki grunted. I fought him once, I may be able to offer some insight. It would be better if we could speak with that shot eye of yours, Hashirama. Too bad he kicked the bucket. Sanada glared at him for speaking so freely of her grandfather's death but said nothing. A loud knocking came to the door of the large meeting room, since then repaired from Sasuke's original assault. The doubled samurai guard within the room stiffened and moved toward the door, their swords up and ready. The captain with the wolf pelt on his back signaled the men to open it and they pulled on the heavy slab doors to open. As they expected the enemy to emerge from the hallway, all the men present had to incline their heads down to see the small toad messenger that was waving at them. Yo! Is Tsunade here? The woman in question looked over towards the door and saw a toad, one that was affiliated with Fukasaku. Yes, I am right here. The toad looked over and smiled at the sight of her, quickly hopping on the table by the other surprised Kage and giving her a message scroll from his back. Tsunade opened the scroll quickly with curious eyes and found out soon just how dire the situation was at home. The other Kage watched as her eyes widened and her breathing became heavy, obviously indicating something was very wrong. What is it, Tsunade? Questioned, concerned for the female Hokage. She looked up from the scroll with trembling hands and dropped it on the table. Konoha is about to come under attack by Madara. He is going to use the tailed beasts on the village. The collective gasps from around the room were enough to show the shock of the news, and A immediately stood up from his seat. We must rally the troops and head for Konoha. This is our chance to defeat Madara once and for all. Inoki huffed and signaled for Akatsuchi to come and pick him up. The big man put the leader on his back. We don't have much time, we have to head for our villages immediately. The other Kage nodded and Mifune turned towards his bodyguards. Order the platoons on standby to prepare for marching orders, we head for Konoha. Just as the man was reaching for his transceiver, a kunai flew through the air from an unseen location and slit the man's throat. I'm afraid we can't allow any of you to leave this place. The Kage looked up into the stands of the room to find dozens of root shinobi surrounding them. The samurai looked ready to charge forward but secretly placed explosive tags erupted on the wall behind them and killed them all in a dirty trick. With the Kage now left only with their bodyguards, the leader of this ambush made his appearance known. Sanada scowled at the sight of Danzo calmly finding a spot within the wall of root forces as he smiled at them. The old man had been waiting for the meeting to adjourn before showing himself. Now it was his turn to finish the battle in a blaze of glory. With little else to say, Danzo signaled for his men to launch their attack at the bewildered Kage. Yuzu Island. Mountain of Fire. Naruto sat on the very edge of the volcano in a meditative form with his palms up against each other in quiet concentration. The rain clouds were not tall enough to reach the height of the volcano's mouth, so it allowed Naruto peace for his training. The lava monkeys surrounded him, quietly watching him as he began the first stage of training. Master Yamusha, please remind me again of the first phase and its point. The large monkey cleared its throat and began to speak again to remind the boy the importance of the first part. This stage of training is what all Crimsonbacks are subjected to, and upon its completion, you will be an honorary Crimsonback yourself. It encourages inner balance with your physical and spiritual energy as you meditate near a very dangerous and very real hazard, the volcano. After you can completely still your chakra and find a peaceful medium, we will take you lower into the mouth, so you will sit on a very hot ledge of cooled magma. Once you can handle that, you will allow scalding lava to hit and burn your back, effectively making you a Crimsonback. We have been able to survive this by conditioning our bodies through training and from our ancestors' hardy skin. That is also where all humans have so far died. It is up to you to find a way to survive and accustom yourself to the lava so that you may not be hurt by it." Naruto opened his eyes for a moment to look at Yamcha. His shirt was off, so there was nothing that protected Naruto from the heat behind him. It felt like tiny blisters were erupting on his skin. What will happen after that? Yamcha looked to Yamara to explain the final step, and the younger monkey spoke up. "Naruto-sama, if you can successfully survive and accustom your body to the extreme heat of the lava, you will then move on to the final stage. In the final stage you must completely submerge yourself in the lava and find balance. It will be extremely difficult, if not impossible to do, but if you can stay alive while being completely unmoving, you can absorb the natural heat, or otherwise known as geothermal energy, into your body. This will augment you in a variety of ways, but what we really wish to see is the fabled avatar form. It is said that only the Four Tails himself was able to accomplish this, and that the ability was passed on to his Jinchuriki through his chakra. If you can master that form, you will be a demigod among men and without match." Naruto had no idea how he was going to survive such a rigorous training regimen, but the sound of reward was too high for him to refuse. "I promised everyone that I would accomplish this. Mei has confidence in me. I can't fail." "Understood." He looked eyes with the monkeys and proudly told them his decision. "I'll get it done in 2 weeks." End of chapter 29. Chapter 30. Reunion with Blood, Konoha's Shodai. Land of Sound. Orochimaru's hideaway. My help. What the hell does that mean? Orochimaru was at first surprised, but it was soon replaced with anger. Was it some sort of joke? Jiraiya kept his poker face though, it was no joke. To defeat the tailed beasts they would need an expert on fighting them, let alone countering Madara's interference. Because Jiraiya had no experience in the forbidden arts of revival techniques, he had to go to the man who perfected it, Orochimaru. "I need you to summon a dead person with the Ito Tensei, can you do it?" Orochimaru's surprise lowered back down to a comfortable smirk, and he began to laugh. This irritated Jiraiya. "Hahaha. You want to revive someone? You want me to do it? I thought you were better than that, Jiraiya, having to use such a forbidden technique. Why would you want their soul to suffer by bringing them back to this hell?" Jiraiya crossed his arms and decided that it was best to explain the situation. "Orochimaru, Madara Uchiha is alive and well. In fact, he is the leader of Akatsuki. Right now he is on his way to Konoha with 4-tailed beasts just waiting to unleash them on the village. I know you don't care about Konoha, but the least you can do is hear me out." Orochimaru was surprised to hear that Madara was going to use 4-tailed beasts on Konoha. However, as Jiraiya said, he really didn't care. "Fine then, I'll humor you. Why should I help you?" Jiraiya let out a breath. He had been holding it, at least his old teammate would hear him out. "Well, I can see that you are sick, how about I find a way to cure you?" Orochimaru scowled at the man for his pitiful offer and waved an arm towards Kabuto. "You really think you can find a cure? Kabuto has tried everything, and yet I'm still bedridden. I have no host to transfer into, I will be dead soon. Why should I even bother to trust that you could fulfill that promise when we have been enemies for ages? Because we are teammates. No matter if you are a traitor to the village or not, that doesn't mean the time we were together was lost. I loved you like a brother, you were the greatest rival I could ask for, but you had to leave the village so you could gain immortality. That hit everyone hard, but it hit me the hardest. That was why I went after you, to get a straight answer." Orochimaru realized it was turning into a shouting match over their past and decided to defend himself. "That damned village could offer me nothing. I learned the techniques, did the missions, tried to become Hokage. Everything I did wasn't enough. My experiments were prohibited, and my rightful place as Yondaime was given to that damn brat you trained. What was left for me? Nothing. Your pitiful attempt to get me to come back only solidified my choice. Nothing has changed." Jiraiya gritted his teeth as he listened to his teammate talk trash about the village. It made him cringe with anger. "Have you really lost all your feelings from when you were in Konoha? When we were on a team, wasn't that fun, rewarding even? Can you really say that you no longer have any ties with the village?" Orochimaru smiled, an evil smile that just made Jiraiya scowl. "Oh, of course I have ties with the village, Jiraiya, if of course they will net me more power. The only thing left in me is bitter hatred, now get out of here." Jiraiya wasn't about to leave though, he needed Orochimaru's help. "Since I haven't forgotten what it means to be a real teammate, I'll offer my body to be your next host. Just please, help save Konoha with me." The two sound ninja were taken aback by Jiraiya's offer. Was he really willing to sacrifice himself? What are you saying? Do you even understand the basis of Orochimaru-sama's technique? You are too old, your body would reject him within a few moments. It's hopeless to try and barter with that argument. Orochimaru said nothing as Kabuto explained the basic details of the technique to Jiraiya. There has to be some way. Maybe we can get Sanada to heal you, or maybe find someone that is acceptable, anything. Orochimaru was again surprised by Jiraiya's attitude, the man seemed as if he was going insane with desperation. What the hell is the matter with you, Jiraiya? Why are you trying so hard for Konoha? It has done nothing for you, even your precious Sanada never fell for you. Why are you bartering for their lives like a beggar in the streets? Jiraiya looked down at the floor, trying his best to formulate an answer. It's not just for Konoha, I'm doing this because you were once my teammate, I haven't forgotten it like you have. Even if you don't have any desire to help Konoha, the least you can do is help me one last time. I can't force you, so it's up to you whether Konoha gets the help it needs or not. Orochimaru shook his head, the man forgot who he was talking to. He was the bitter hater of the leaf. You were going to try and get me to summon the Shodai Hokage, weren't you? Jiraiya looked at him with surprise at how he saw through his plan but nodded anyway. You wanted to control the tailed beasts leaving Madara without an army. Well, even if I was willing, the man is trapped in the stomach of the death god, we can't get him out without contacting the god himself. Jiraiya smirked and pointed a thumb at his chest in triumph. The third showed me the technique to summon him, all I need is your cooperation and we can have the Shodai up and running pretty quick. Orochimaru was again amazed by Jiraiya's spontaneity, but thought little of it. We would also need a sacrifice, a living one. There isn't any chance that we can find one on such short notice. Jiraiya had thought of that, but the specifics were where things began to get fuzzy. Well, I was planning on sacrificing myself, if you didn't have a better idea. Orochimaru was again surprised at how casual his teammate suggested his own death. What happened to Jiraiya? Are you sure that would be such a good idea? I thought you were supposed to help heal me. The man gave an apologetic smile and scratched the back of his head. Sorry. These little details are a bit difficult for me to keep track of. Orochimaru's side, there was his old teammate with his annoying forgetfulness. Orochimaru-sama, you can't actually be thinking of accepting his offer. He's from Konoha, he could just be lying. Kabuto argued, he had expected Orochimaru to do something about Jiraiya, yet here he remained in his bedchambers. Kabuto, I am dying, there is little point in being stubborn. Even if he was lying and he was here to kill me, I am about to die anyway. I could sacrifice myself and get some vengeance against Akatsuki with my last breath, it would be better than laying in this bed waiting to die. Jiraiya's eyes widened as his friend brainstormed out loud, he couldn't be considering being the sacrifice? Orochimaru. I thought we discussed that, if anything I would be the sacrifice, you still have a chance to get healed or get a new host. I don't know the technique, I'm not immortal. You still have to learn the world's jutsu, right? Orochimaru began to chuckle at Jiraiya's hasty reprimand of his idea, when the reality was he couldn't comprehend Orochimaru's thoughts. I'm not so sure I even understand myself these days. Maybe it is the influence of the drugs. But I feel like being a little heroic in my last moments. It would be sweet irony for the leaf to be saved by one of its greatest defectors. I can just imagine their faces now. Summon the death god, Jiraiya, let's get this over with. The man looked as if he was going to protest further, but Orochimaru caught him off with a glare and a coughing fit. Fine. Jiraiya dejectedly admitted, going through the hand signs and summoning the death god himself. The floating specter floated right behind the white-haired man. Why has a mortal summoned me? The death god, impatient as ever, went straight to the point as he saw the three men inside the room. Shinigami-sama, we would like to request that you allow us to temporarily revive one of the souls in your stomach. We are in dire need of his abilities. A loud roar from the god quieted Jiraiya, fearful of getting on his bad side. That is impossible. All the souls consumed by me are in a never-ending struggle with the ones who placed them there, they cannot be removed so easily. Jiraiya gulped and turned towards Orochimaru, who was beginning the preparations for the resurrection with Kabuto. Please, Shinigami-sama, there must be some deal we can work out to just have the spirit temporarily leave and return. Just for a few hours, that is all I ask. Jiraiya got on his knees to beg, surprising the omniscient god. Is it really that important? A shinobi bowing so low. Could this be a true human crisis? Jiraiya nodded his head multiple times, they were practically desperate. He looked up to see the Shinigami looking off into space as he was thinking. It may be done if and only if the soul is on loan and will be returned to me shortly. Also, as this should not become a common thing, I must ask for another sacrifice to come back along with the soul of your chosen warrior." Jiraiya's eyes widened at the hearing of a second sacrifice to appease the death god. He turned around to see Orochimaru's thoughts on it. "Does it require any specific criteria?" Jiraiya questioned, and the Shinigami shook its head negatively. He turned to Orochimaru and patted his chest. "I can be the second sacrifice if you will be the one to inherit the soul, Orochimaru." The pale man shook his head to Jiraiya's volunteering. It wasn't a good plan at all. "No, the Shotai will need someone here to guide him to Konoha and explain the situation. Since you are the one that came up with the idea, you must be the one to lead him." "I'm dying, Jiraiya. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't change hosts anymore. All that is left is for me to try and do something with my life. I'm not asking for redemption, I'm just asking for a worthy way to die. What better way than to become the Shotai incarnated?" Jiraiya swallowed a lump in his throat. Was Orochimaru really willing to go through with it? That was a shock to both Kabuto and the Toad Sage. If he shall not be the sacrifice, then who will? Orochimaru grimaced when he did not have an answer when Kabuto sighed and volunteered. "I'll do it." Jiraiya looked at the boy with surprise. He had no reason to volunteer when he had a future. "Kabuto. I understand you are loyal to me, but you aren't needed here." Kabuto adjusted his glasses and had a small smile on his face, surprising the Sannin. "Orochimaru-sama, I have nothing left after you die. I am an international criminal, all the countries of the world will be after me when Akatsuki is gone. I've also found that I function best as a follower, not a leader. If you die and I live, who will I follow orders from? Besides." Kabuto turned towards his master and smirked. "You would be nothing without my advice and help in the afterlife." Orochimaru's grimace turned to a smirk and he chuckled darkly. "If this was a different situation, Kabuto, I would demand an explanation of that talk. But in this case, I'll take that as a compliment." Kabuto bowed his head as Jiraiya said nothing. There was nothing to say, as it seemed his friend was convinced of his mission. "Let us finish this. Begin your resurrection jutsu." Orochimaru summoned a coffin labeled with the endearing kanji for first, as such for the one they would be summoning. "Jiraiya, help me get to the coffin, I can't walk." Jiraiya quickly moved to his old friend's bedside and gently lifted him up, balancing him with an arm over his shoulders. "Orochimaru, are you sure?" Jiraiya had to ask one last time. This was the last chance he had to take back his place as the sacrifice. Orochimaru shook his head and entered the tall standing coffin. "I guess this is goodbye, Jiraiya. Just remember, don't let the leaf look at this as a favor from me. I'm not really doing it for them, this is just so I can die with some dignity." Jiraiya, despite himself, smiled at his old friend's words and wiped his eyes a little bit. "Yeah, you got it, pal." Orochimaru nodded and held up the final hand sign for Ito Tensei, causing the coffin to slowly close and cover him inside. "Human. Come forward so I may absorb your soul. Your master will follow you into the afterlife when it is time for Hashirama's soul to return." Kabuto came towards the sound of the voice and felt a ghostly appendage slam into his stomach, causing him to gasp out in surprise and pain. The Shinigami pulled on Kabuto's soul and ripped it from within him, its blue aura writhing in pain as his body fell pale and limp. Without even a final word, Kabuto's body hit the floor and the Reaper ate it whole, leaving it confined to its stomach. With that action done, the spirit regurgitated a soul to attempt to release Hashirama from its jail. Holding it in his arms, the screaming head of a soul was revealed to be his brother, Tobirama. The Shinigami shook its head and ate Tobirama again, preparing for a second time to find Hashirama. With a final tug from its esophagus, the soul of Hashirama was revealed. It looked as if it was in constant pain, no doubt from its current living conditions in the Reaper's stomach. With little finesse, the Reaper threw the soul at the coffin and Hashirama entered and took control of Orochimaru's body. All of this went unseen by Jiraiya as the coffin was sealed and the Reaper began to fade away. "I will absorb their souls in 6 hours' time, beware of my return." Jiraiya could only nod in silence as the Reaper disappeared, leaving him alone with the coffin. He turned towards it now to see the final act of a dreadful play. With a sickening creak, the wooden hinges came off and the coffin's lid began to fall forward to reveal the contents. As if to heighten the suspense, a wind blew from the coffin and snuffed the flames of all the candles, leaving Jiraiya in the dark. A loud crack echoed around the room when the lid hit the ground and made Jiraiya scramble to find light. Holding up a ram hand sign, Jiraiya focused his chakra and created a small flame in the palm of his hand. He held it up towards the coffin to try and catch a peek, but found it too weak. Feeling as if the suspense was killing him, Jiraiya spoke softly to try and rouse the attention of the figure occupying the coffin. "Orochimaru, is that you? Was it a success?" The figure took a step forward, somewhat stumbling as it got used to walking again after so much time. Jiraiya's eyes widened when a deep, warm voice began to fill the room. It wasn't the cold, hissing of Orochimaru's usual speech pattern. It could only mean one outcome. "Orochimaru? No. My name is Hashirama Senju." The fire fully illuminated the figure now as he stepped into range, a smile splaying over the Wizenkage's features. "Perhaps you can tell me why, or even how, I have been summoned again after being sealed into the death god's stomach." Jiraiya gulped. He had never spoken to the first Hokage before. Hell, he had only seen his face in pictures and heard about him in school or from his sensei. The man was kind though, it radiated off of him like heat from a candle. There was no doubt in the Sanin's mind why people chose him to be the leader of Konoha. His charisma was off the charts. "Shadai-sama." Jiraiya could barely say anything, still in shock over the ordeal. The first seemed to notice this and his smile increased. "I see that you must be a leaf shinobi, the will of fire burns bright in you. Perhaps you can tell me why I am here, and then we can go from there." Jiraiya nodded dumbly, his mind needed a stimulus to work himself out of shock. "I summoned the death god to work out a deal to bring you back for a short time. The village of Konoha is in danger, great danger. I hate to release you so suddenly, Hokage, but our enemy is not a normal one. We need your special abilities to have victory." Hashirama's eyes widened in surprise and then narrowed, realizing just how serious it was. "I see. If you went through all this trouble to get me here, I can only guess that this is truly a danger. Tell me though, who is this enemy?" Jiraiya's eyes narrowed, and Hashirama tried to guess the man's thought process. Nothing could have prepared him, though, for the answer. "Madara Uchiha." Hashirama was frozen solid. He couldn't believe that his old rival's name would be brought up, let alone be told that he was alive. "But I killed Madara at the Valley of the End. How can he be alive?" Jiraiya sighed. If only the first really had killed him back then, it would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. It seemed he was able to live through that battle, and now he is endangering the world with a plot of world domination. "The reason why I summon you, though, wasn't because he is our enemy, it's what he is using against us is what troubles me." Hashirama caught on, but again could only look at Jiraiya with shock. "He is using the tailed beasts? They should all be inside Jinchuriki by now though, how can he harness their power?" It didn't make any sense. Madara had always been a genius, but to go as far as to learn how to pull beasts from their containers was such a sadistic jutsu. "I don't understand how he was able to learn how, but he has, so far, captured 4 Jinchuriki and their tailed beasts. He is preparing to use them against Konoha, and you and I need to go stop them." Again Hashirama was overwhelmed with the sheer level of information being spoken to him. 4 tailed beasts? That is… I can't believe it. My old nemesis really does mean to bury Konoha because of his hate. 4 tailed beasts. Hashirama was mumbling to himself, still in disbelief. Jiraiya was about to rouse him from his musings when the man looked into his eyes with a very stern look, somewhat surprising him. "I understand, let's get going. I will stop him, it is my fault it has gotten this bad in the first place." Jiraiya nodded and led him out of the room and out into the base. "We have to hurry, there is no telling when the attack will start, and we are many miles away." Hashirama silently cursed as he followed Jiraiya, trying his best to figure out a plan of attack. His eyes widened when the thought of his necklace came up. The last he remembered was giving it to Tsunade. "Boy, what has happened to my necklace? Last I remember it was in the hands of my granddaughter, Tsunade." Jiraiya looked to him and thought about it for a second, remembering that Naruto had already given it back to her. Tsunade was crushed after that and couldn't find it in herself to wear it. She kept it in the desk inside the Hokage office. "It's in Konoha, we can get it there." "Hang in there, Gramps, I am on my way." Land of Fire. Konohagakure outskirts. Madara's staging area. Madara stood on a tree branch, silently waiting for the sealing process to finish. Around each strategically placed was at least a dozen shinobi, all holding scrolls in their mouths and whispering incantations as they went through hand signs. A circle drawn in blood surrounded each large pot. The symbols were lighting up in an eerie green as the tailed beasts were slowly pulled out from the containers. Hitsuji, Seru, Hitsuji, Yuma, Mi, Tori, Mi, Hitsuji, Tora, Na, Yuma, Na, Yuma, Yu, Seru, Hitsuji, Mi, Tatsu, Inu, Inu, Tatsu, Tori, Yu, Hitsuji, Seru, Yuma, Seru. Their endless chants droned in Madara's ears. A lesser man would have gone insane with annoyance. Madara zoned it all out with sheer excitement. Soon. Oh, very soon. Yu, Yuma, Yu, Na, Tora, Hitsuji, Hitsuji, Tora, Seru, Mi, Hitsuji. Tailed beast container, release. The men removed their scrolls from their mouths and placed them in the corresponding positions on the glowing circle in front of them. The light intensified and raced towards the pots that were in the center of each ring. The kanji that indicated their numbers lit up, and the tops of the pots began to creak open. Tailed beast energy leaked out of each one as the men scrambled to find some distance. The heavy release of energy cracked the ground and sent fissures coursing through the dirt. Gale force winds began to blow as the chakra began to take a corporeal shape in the world. Madara watched as the four-tailed beasts soon to be under his control manifested in their beastly forms, easily towering over the forest they were summoned in. That's it. Come on out to play, tailed beasts. Look into my eyes and feel the control of the Sharingan. With their attention grabbed, Madara placed the simple beasts under a genjutsu of control. Sharingans replaced their pupils as the tailed beasts fell sway to his control with ease. As it was only a short way to Konoha, Madara felt the urge to walk there with his pets obediently following behind. It would be grand entrance that kicked off the even grander demise of the village hidden in the leaf. His men scrambled and tried their best to stay out of the beast's path as they began their monstrous stampede towards Konoha. Each footstep a mini-earthquake was heard and felt. With the amount of energy released from the summoning, it is only a matter of time before the leaf sends squads to check it out. No matter. I will just have the men under my command deal with them. They are nothing but flies compared to the beasts I hold under my control now. Sir, Konoha's squads are coming. What should we do? One of his men shouted out to him, frightened towards the summons, but even more worried about the response from Konoha. Go and eliminate them. Nothing can stand in the way of the beast's advance. The Kiri shinobi dispersed and soon clacks and flashes of light could be seen in the distant foliage, evidence the battle had already begun. Time to test out their abilities. What better way to start this off but with a bang? The Seven Tails, a large rhinoceros beetle with wings for tails, brought its head up and slammed its horns right into the ground where the battle was taking place. Compared to the earthquakes from their steps, the utter chaos created from the headbutt, that ripples of the shock wave were sent in all directions of the continent. Tsunami-like waves formed in the oceans many miles away, and entire villages that happened to be nearby were demolished in an instant. Konoha had its warning, the chakra monsters had arrived. As Madara strode past the huge crater, he saw the bodies and crushed remains of what were once his forces. He merely shook his head and continued on, a worthy sacrifice for his ambitions. Konohagakure. Hokage's home. Office. Kaharu and Homura were inside the Hokage's office, looking after things, while she was away. It had been relatively quiet since she had left a few days ago, leaving the advisors with little to do but stand around and think. While they did not necessarily enjoy the aspect of allying with the other villages, neither could say it wasn't a good idea considering situation they were in facing Akatsuki. Also, without the deterrent of owning the Nine Tails Jinchuuriki, they were without the power they once had. Reflecting on Naruto, they still held by the belief that it would be a better idea to reel him back in and hold him inside the village. While it would be next to impossible now that he had gone and re-established Uzumaki, it was only right the Nine Tails remained with Konoha and the Land of Fire. A young boy like him did not understand such power or the qualities needed to be a Kage. He was nothing but an imposter and a disgrace to the title in their eyes. But, as mere advisors and retired shinobi, they had little influence on the workings of current Konoha. With their biggest supporter Danzo gone and joined with Akatsuki, they had little choice but to follow through with the Hokage's thinking. They could only hope it would not ultimately destroy them in the end. Kaharu, when shall we have Kakashi Hataka's execution scheduled? Homura suddenly asked the elderly woman, breaking the silence between them for quite some time. Perhaps after Akatsuki is defeated? Then again, that could be too long from now. His death will hopefully garner further support in the effort to recapture the Nine Tails Jinchuuriki from Yuzu. It has to be timed right if we wish to succeed. Homura nodded. He began to write a few notes down on a scroll before stuffing it back into his robe. It shouldn't be long before the Hokage returns. We can discuss it with her and see how the alliance is preparing to deal with Akatsuki. I believe a swift move is necessary against Madara, otherwise he will wriggle from our grasp again. Koharu nodded in agreement to his words and looked out the window to the village, noticing the darkening clouds coupled with the late evening made the entire sky seem black. A sudden shaking hit the room, and both had trouble finding purchase in staying up. Koharu found her balance with the windowsill and chair, while Homura was forced to his knees by the earthquake. As suddenly as it began though, the quake ended, leaving the elders confused as to the reason behind such a rare phenomenon. It was answered quickly by the elder toad couple who had just entered the office in a puff of smoke. Madara Uchiha is here. He has brought his tailed beasts to destroy Konoha. You must prepare yourselves. Fukasaku quickly yelled out in warning, out of breath from going at full speed to get to Konoha in record time. The elders looked at them with confused expressions, they were not sure they heard right. Madara Uchiha was there? With tailed beasts? The toad's theory was quickly backed up when an Anbu arrived and knelt before the two elders. Report. Homura ordered, a certain edge to his voice as his mind began to fret over the few possibilities of what really happened. Either it really was a natural occurrence or something very powerful created it. The question is though, which one is it? I dearly hope it is the former. Homura-sama, Koharu-sama, 4 extremely large chakra signatures have been felt to be approaching the village from the north. We believe it has something to do with the recent earthquake that hit the village. We have no visual of the source of the chakra though. The advisors exchanged glances as they knew that the toads were right, Madara had come. This is no natural occurrence, Homura. Koharu warned, turning towards the Anbu and began to speak with an orderly tone. Put the village on a level 1 emergency, all available shinobi teams should head to the north wall and prepare to sortie against the incoming enemy forces. Have Shizune prepare the medical corps and get the hospital prepped, there will be many wounded coming in. The Anbu seemed startled from the amount of orders but knew not to question, only to obey. Yes ma'am. He saluted and disappeared in a blur, leaving Homura to summon a few more shinobi. The village is under a level 1 emergency. Move to the academy and residential districts and begin to evacuate the children and civilians to the mountains. Tell everyone you can see and make sure the teams heading to the safe houses have their barrier scrolls with them. We can't afford to have them endangered from a stray jutsu. The shinobi saluted and disappeared to fulfill the orders, leaving both advisors to slump in sudden exhaustion as their minds caught up with adrenaline. Fukasaku-sama, will your toads aid us in battle? I am afraid without you, we have little hope without the Hokage here. The best our shinobi can do is to delay them as they did the Nine Tails. Fukasaku nodded to Homura's request and began to head out the door. Yes, I will bring Gamabunta and the others to the north gate with a summoning. I will let you know now that other than your Hokage, more reinforcements are coming. We just have to hold out long enough. Make sure you get as many people as you can to safety. Come on, Shima. The two toads left the advisors to their own devices as the village scrambled to defend themselves against an invincible enemy. Uzumaki. Uzumaki compound. Mei awoke in the early morning, nearly midnight, to a slight tremor that shook her bed. It was barely noticeable, but for people like Mei who were light sleepers, it was an instant wake-up call. She was about to get out of bed to investigate when a light breeze told her she had no clothes on and quickly placed her discarded robe on. Looking over to wake up Naruto, she was sadly reminded he was not in bed with her and she continued on alone. She got up from bed and went to Rashi's room immediately, only a few steps down the hall from her own. Mei found him still asleep, albeit he did look angry with a frown on his face. With him safe, Mei went back to her own room and opened the balcony door to look outside. The rain was still going, but it was much lighter now and she could easily see outside. What she saw completely stumped her in surprise and confusion. Dozens of shinobi, mostly Anbu, were running around the compound, opening doors to homes and positioning themselves around the compound. Curious as to what was going on, Mei went to her closet and put on her usual ninja attire, a tight robe that went down to her thighs with pink shorts and armbands that matched her robe. Running out of the house, she was immediately engaged by 3 shinobi. 2 were hurricanes, the bodyguards of the Uzukage and his family, while the other was a masked man with a red robe covering his body. Mei felt somewhat better seeing Ao on the scene. He was a level-headed man and chances were that, if he had given the order for the men to be there, it was with good reason. Mei-sama, it is good to see that you are all right. It would probably be better if you went back to bed though. Mei crossed her arms as a subtle show of dominance that she would not do as he asked, instead responding with a question. I just woke up, what's going on here? Why have the Anbu been deployed to the compound? This is private property. She reminded the Anbu general, the clans were completely entitled to their privacy, and as a rule of thumb shinobi, not of that clan had no business being on the grounds. I'm sorry Mizu. I mean Mei-sama, but there has been an incident inside the compound. I have received orders from the Uzukage himself to sequester the Anbu and medical teams here until we receive word to do otherwise. Mei's eyes widened in surprise upon hearing the order was given by Naruto and calmed down somewhat, uncrossing her arms and relaxing. She still wanted to know what the incident was though. What exactly happened, or do you even know? Ao sighed and shrugged. Well, it appears as though an infiltrator by the name of Sasuke Uchiha entered the village in an attempt to kill the Uzukage. Mei lightly gasped at the information, bringing a hand to her mouth to cover it. But he was intercepted by an unknown friendly shinobi and led away from the village. Naruto said he trusted the person, so I have no reason to doubt him. The only thing is that we have yet to see this shinobi or the Uchiha, so it is impossible to confirm what either of their statuses are. Mei took the information in and stood there in silence, unsure of what to make of it. So, I can guess that my husband made a stop to speak to you before going off to train then? Ao suddenly jerked his head towards her in surprise, wondering how she knew. He nodded in affirmation. Yes, that's right. He gave me 2 scrolls, one with orders to fulfill and the other to give to the beast tamers. I already handed over the scroll to Akaru, all that's left is to open up his orders. I haven't yet because his last orders to me were to make sure you and Rashi remain safe. I have been up all night watching the house. Mei smiled at that, glad to hear Naruto's concern for her and Rashi even when he had other pressing matters to concern himself with. Right, come in the house with me and let me see the scroll. The 3 masked shinobi fell into step behind her and they entered the Uzumaki kitchen. Mei dismissed the 2 hurricanes with a subtle hand gesture, sending both of them to the entrance of the kitchen as guards. Ao took off his mask and rubbed his eye before he took out the scroll with the Uzukage's stamp on it. He handed it over to the Kage-level woman and watched as she touched it with a finger and inserted some chakra into it, opening the scroll and allowing Mei to read. Ao, these orders must be accomplished as soon as possible. This war will be over very soon, one way or the other, so we must prepare for the final battle. I need you to get messenger birds out to every single one of our allies who have pledged military support to us. We can expect AIM to arrive soon as they are being led by one of the Akatsuki defectors. We need to rally our own forces so that we may finish Madara. While I would like to speak again with the 4-village alliance, I doubt it would get us anywhere, and I have little time for rhetoric. As they underestimate me, because of my age, I cannot doubt that I will get little accomplished. Instead, we must rely on our own strength to win the day, even if it means we must do so without the support of the elemental nations. Send messenger birds to Crescent Island, Bear Country, Land of Waterfalls. Make sure that at the end of 2 weeks, you prepare our armies and march for Kiri. I am almost positive that Madara will make his final stand there, to which we will meet his forces with our own. When you get there, make sure Akari uses that scroll I had you give him. It will bring me and all the lava monkeys to battle. Hopefully by that time, I will have finished my training. The fate of the world, no matter how cliché it sounds, indeed rests on me being summoned to fight, so do not forget. Also be sure to keep an eye on my family. I am worried about them when I can't be there to protect them. It would be best to allow Mei to be in temporary command of the village. She is most likely more cut out for it than either of us. Please allow her to read this as well. Shadai Uzukage. Naruto Uzumaki. What does it say, ma'am? Ao asked politely as it seemed to be a long message. It was no doubt extremely important. Mei placed the scroll on the island counter and allowed Ao to pick it up and read. Her stern, Kage look had resurfaced over her face as she prepared to once again lead a village to war. It seems my husband has left me behind to do his dirty work while he is away. I suppose it is the least I can do for him while he risks his life training in some volcano. Come on Ao, you can read that on the way. Ao looked up from the scroll in curiosity as Mei began to leave the kitchen. He quickly got up from his seat and followed her out the door and towards the front door to the house. What do you mean, ma'am? Where are we going? Mei turned around and pointed towards the 2 hurricanes that were beginning to follow. You will remain here. Gather the rest of your squad and protect my child while I am away. If anything happens, I will be in the Uzukage Tower. Come along, Ao, we have much work to do. The 2 hurricanes looked at each other and shrugged, setting off to follow their orders. Ao just nodded to her request and placed his mask back on as they exited the building into the rain. He handed her a spare robe that was made for Anbu traveling, and she quickly placed it on, protecting her clothing from the rain. Let's move. The two disappeared in a blur towards the Uzumaki tower in the center of the village. They had a village to run. Land of Iron. Iron Fortress. Kage Summit. During the opening throes of Madara's attack on Konoha, the Kage of the elemental nations were embattled with root shinobi at the summit. It was one last deterrent to keep the strongest ninja and their troops from coming to aid Konoha, even if it meant sacrificing Akatsuki's special forces. While it would most likely not kill the Kage, it would most certainly delay them, and that was all the Uchiha could have asked for. Damn it. Get out of my way. A blasted through of a few root shinobi that had teamed up against a Rikage. Before they could finish their hand signs, a smashed into them with his lightning-enhanced taijutsu. Boss sure can take care of business with just one arm. Darui muttered out, grunting in exertion from holding back a root officer's tanto with his butcher sword. C glared at him as he knocked another would-be assassin away from the Rikage's blind spot. Shut up and fight, Darui. The white-haired man shrugged and pushed the officer back, keeping him on the defensive as the Kumo shinobi prepared to finish him. Akatsuki created a golem of earth and had it become his partner as he fought off a large number of root forces, obviously teaming up on the larger guy. The golem picked up one hapless soldier that attempted to strike at Akatsuchi's flank and smashed him into the floor. Going through hand signs, Akatsuchi aimed his new jutsu at a few enemies that were beginning to charge at the Tsuchikage. Earth release? Earth spikes. A few spikes were created from the stone tile floor and impaled a few root while causing the rest to dodge. Inoki glared at the boy as he scrambled to defend himself after trying to help the Tsuchikage. Akatsuchi. Stop worrying about me and watch your own back. The younger man stuttered off an affirmative as he dodged more attacks while Inoki turned back to his foe, a particularly savvy shinobi amongst root known for his dangerous hidden jutsu. Now time to finish you off, you little squat. Dust release, swift decomposition. The Tsuchikage created a cloud of dust and sent it flying at Torrent, forcing him to dodge the tiny particles. He spared a look over his shoulder to see some of it touch the wall behind him, and it acted like an eraser, completely disintegrating the wall. He whistled in admiration and turned back to the Kage. Looks like I'll have to be careful around you. He charged forward and removed his glove, trying to lay a hand on the Tsuchikage's face, only to be warded away by the lingering dust in the air. He was however able to lay a hand on the Tsuchikage's cloak, forcing him to quickly release it as it was infested with nano bugs capable of eating his skin. The body of a crushed root soldier flew over the short-stature man and looked to see Tsunade slightly huffing in exhaustion. Around her lay multiple craters and bodies of wrecked soldiers who had attempted to face her in close combat only to fail. The Tsuchikage saw that the room was beginning to get too chaotic with all the fighting in such a small space and felt it was necessary to change the scenery. Boy. If you want to fight me, you'll have to follow. Inoki ran out into the hallway and sure enough was rewarded with a few root soldiers including Torina ready to fight him. You made a mistake separating yourself from your bodyguard, old man. Torina taunted, emphasizing his age as his compatriots prepared their attacks. Inoki grew a tick on his forehead and went through hand signs, an angry scowl on his lips. We'll just see about that, kiddo, you just underestimated me. Earth release, wall crush. The walls in the hallway began to move and suddenly launched towards one another, attempting to squish the men in between. Only Torina was able to escape from the attack, but soon found himself in great pain. He looked on his back to find it disintegrating from dust and looked back at the old man for an explanation. Inoki smirked as the boy found out his collaboration jutsu with dust and earth release. From the two walls slamming together, a small amount of dust kicked out from the impact point. You thought you were safe when you jumped out, but in reality you were still in my trap. Learn to respect your elders in the afterlife, it's the least you can do. Torina by that point in time had completely disintegrated into dust, allowing Inoki to view the carnage back in the meeting hall. Gaara and Tamari were fighting in the stands with her using wind jutsu to slice up those that got too close, while Gaara used his sand to defend them from attacks and crush the root forces that got too close. Sakura was fighting a blonde root member who wielded the double-bladed tanto, and the samurai were fending off the soldiers near Mifune, where he and A had stood near each other. Shintention. Fu yelled out, sending his consciousness into Sakura's to take over her body, only to find a lot of resistance. What is this? Does she have a split personality? Inner Sakura began to fight with him in her mindscape, clearly overwhelming him through sheer surprise. As he attempted to escape back to his body, Sanada made her way to Sakura and smashed a root soldier who was attempting to take advantage of Fu's attack on her mind. She easily stopped his attack and ran over to Fu's body, kicking it into a wall and forcing Fu into full unconsciousness when he finally returned to his body. As the battle wound down to just a few root soldiers left, Sanada personally confronted Danzo. The man had already removed his unneeded clothes, revealing both his Sharingan arm and his eye. The Hokage also noticed with interest that the arm Naruto had gotten rid of was still missing, meaning the man couldn't use a majority of his ninjutsu. It didn't matter much though, the man was already tired and had used most of his abilities already to little effect. "Give it up, Danzo, this battle is over," she announced, trying her best to make him see reason and give up. All he did was smile and chuckle. "Oh no, Sanada, you see, this battle was only a diversion. I'm sure you already knew that thanks to the messenger, but you should also know that Konoha is finished. My part is over." Sanada gritted her teeth in anger and balled her fists up so much she began to draw blood from her nails biting into her skin. It didn't make any sense why Danzo would do this to Konoha. He loved his village. "Why, Danzo? I thought you loved Konoha? Why go this far? Was this part of your plan?" Before Danzo could answer, smashed into him with his fist and sent the man flying back into a wall. "It doesn't matter, Tsunade, what matters is getting to Konoha and finishing Madara. See, Darui, we are leaving." The Hokage collected his things and headed out with his bodyguards, intent on raising the alarm in Kumo. "Well, I suppose we'll get going too. Come on, Akatsuchi." The Tsuchi Kage beckoned his bodyguard, who quickly picked up the struggling man and placed him on his shoulders before running out of the room. "We shall as well, our forces will head to Konoha as soon as possible, though I fear we will be too late." Gaara and Temari disappeared in a gust of wind and disintegrated into sand. Sanada went closer to Danzo's form, wanting to investigate something. She had seen something off about his left eye, the normal one, right before he was finished off by A. When she approached, she could find nothing off about it, confusing her further. "What did I see? I thought for sure it looked like A." "Sanada-sama, we need to get moving." Sakura's warning awoke her from her thoughts and she quickly picked up her fallen jacket and left the meeting place to return to Konoha. "Hang on, I'm coming, Konoha." Yuzu Island. Mountain of Fire. "Very good, Uzumaki-sama. I can feel your chakras, they are completely still, even with your proximity to the volcano." Naruto said nothing, his eyes were closed in quiet concentration as he remained perfectly still with his chakra calmed. "Yes. I think I have mastered this part of the exercise," Naruto said as he slowly opened his eyes and stood up, bringing the monkeys to stand up as well. "It looks like it is time for the second part of the first phase. We must enter the mouth of the volcano." Yamasha noted and Naruto nodded, indicating with a hand gesture that Yamasha lead the way. "Naruto-sama, are you sure you are ready to go in? All the other humans went straight to the next part and died from burns. Are you sure you can handle the flames?" Naruto nodded an affirmative and explained his confident attitude. "While it will take some getting used to in a different spot, I think I can handle the lava. While I was training with calming my chakra, I developed a passive way of relieving my back from the searing heat of the volcano. I enveloped my backside in a small casing of Kyuubi's chakra, as it is separate from mine, therefore it was usable at the same time as me calming my normal chakra." Yamasha and the others were astounded at Naruto's chakra control. To be able to use his two types of chakra in two different ways at the same time was no easy feat for anyone, not even other Jinchuriki. "I see, no other human that attempted the lava training could do that, so we never considered it." "Very nice thinking, Naruto-sama." Yamara complimented, to which Naruto nodded in appreciation. Their party continued to delve down into the volcano until they reached a ledge that was as close as they could get to the lava without touching it. Shots of lava would spurt up and occasionally land nearby, forcing Naruto to shy away from the dangerous fluid. "It is time, Naruto-sama, please sit down here to mediate. We will stay with you and do our best to get you somewhere safe should something go wrong." Yamasha said to the Uzukage and Naruto moved to his spot and sat down, closing his eyes in concentration. He began to calm his chakra down while slowly tugging on Kyuubi's reservoirs, forming that chakra in the rough shape of a protective barrier on his back. To someone with a keen eye, they could just barely make out the orange-red chakra that had formed on Naruto's back, others would be able to feel the demonic chakra seeping from it. Kyuubi sat in his cage, waiting and waiting for the kid to finish taking his chakra. It had felt the tug the first time the boy had attempted the shield and came up with a devilish idea. While he had sat idly by for 18 years, the fox had finally found a way to free himself. All it would take would be a little incentive for Naruto to use more of his chakra. He began to cackle evilly as a particularly powerful bunch of lava shot up. I think someone is about to get burned to a crisp. Naruto's eye jolted open when a particularly powerful shot of lava slammed right into his back and began to burn it, not enough to be fatal, but enough to hurt. Naruto screamed in pain and lost his concentration, forcing him to take out more of Kyuubi's chakra and lose focus on his own. Cursing, Naruto did his best to get back under control when more lava hit his back, forcing him into unconsciousness from the sheer amount of pain. The lava monkeys grew concerned and pulled him away from the edge. They had noticed he was taking too much demon chakra and felt it best to take him back to the mouth of the volcano. Naruto awoke in front of Kyuubi's cage. His dazed expression was quickly wiped away when he noticed a state of his subconscious. The entire boiler room was glowing red and Kyuubi's cage was bright with orange-red chakra, threatening to break through. The bars that made up the cage were being slammed into with the fox's body. The strong steel was slowly beginning to twist and bend. Worst of all, Naruto saw the seal paper beginning to come off as a sure sign of his seal weakening. Naruto ran forward and attempted to hold the paper in place to stop the fox's advance. He was just barely able to withstand each hit the fox did on the cage and keep standing, but he saw that the seal would most definitely not hold for long. With one last strong push, the fox broke the seal and pushed Naruto far across the room. It roared out a challenge and charged forward as if to eat Naruto. The Uzumaki for once found an enemy that even he could not handle alone and prepared to face the wrath of his Biju. Damn it. How could he get this strong so fast? Was he really analyzing the seal all this time, just waiting for the right time to break out? What am I supposed to do? Just hold on, Naruto. The voice echoed out from the dark part of the room behind him, and he turned to look over his shoulder to find the source of the feminine voice. Suddenly, dozens of chakra chains came from the darkness and latched onto the Kyuubi, restraining his powerful form with ease. The fox seemed to know the chakra and gritted his teeth in anger, fighting against a subduing chakra. Damn you, Kushina. Naruto froze at the mention of his mother's name and turned to see a beautiful red-headed woman walk out from the darkness. Mom. Is that you? Kushina looked down at her son who was still lying on the ground and smiled. Yes, I am Naruto, but you will have to wait a while before we get to talk. Your father has to finish resealing Kyuubi. Naruto's eyes whitened at the word father and he turned back at the cage to find the Kyuubi to be inside, restrained by chains. I hate to see you again, Fox. But at least I got to see my son again because of your greed. A voice came from behind Naruto and he turned around again to see his father, Minato Namikaze, standing next to his mother, a warm smile on his face as he looked at Naruto with pride. Dad. Naruto quickly picked himself up and stood face to face with his parents, not completely believing what he was seeing. Yep, it's us, Naruto. Just let me reset your seal to fix those bars. Naruto tugged his shirt up and it allowed Minato to reset the bleeding ink, reforming it to its original form. That's the last time I can do that, Naruto. It'll be up to you to fix the seal from now on. Naruto nodded and just stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to say. So. Minato sensed the awkwardness too and together with his son, scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. My son. The first Uzumaki. I guess you're following your old man, huh? Minato mumbled out in pride, only to have Kushina punch him in the shoulder. Of course he was gonna be a Kage, that was like obvious. Kushina retorted only to grab her mouth with both hands when she realized she made her unusual speech impediment. She was surprised when Naruto laughed and pointed at her. Haha. I used to do the same thing when I was younger. Kushina at first pouted in anger at his playful jibe, but soon began to laugh with her family as it finally began to sink in that they were reunited. I can't believe you guys are here right now. This is just incredible. Minato suddenly got serious after Naruto's remark and set a hand on his son's shoulder, surprising him. Naruto, we can't be here for long. Repairing the seal wasn't the only reason we appeared. Naruto gulped and looked at both his parents, curious as to just what they had to say. End of chapter 30.